From Tumwater, Washington, going out to the 5 counties and beyond. No Shh, it's the TRL Podcast. I'm Chris.
I'm Annalisa, and we are your hosts for the library podcast that talks about more than just books.
Hello, Annalisa.
Hi, Chris.
How are you feeling after our summer hiatus?
I'm feeling very happy to be back. I don't know if anybody noticed that we had a little bit of time off or not, or cared, but we are very happy to be back.
But in fact, we are back in the studio, podcasting once again.
Yes, and I'm really excited about the guests that we have on this episode for our first episode back. Are you excited?
Yes, I am. I hope to get a little bit of maybe some career advice out of this. So I'm going to set this up by doing what I love to do and talking about myself for a second. Whenever I talk to people about the podcast, coworkers and friends, usually we get on the topic of not liking to hear ourselves talk, because we have to listen to these when we're in the editing process, and often guests will say that they don't like to listen to themselves, because it's kind of like a universal, seeming like a human thing to not want to listen to yourself talk, right?
Yep.
I know you've said that.
I feel fine about listening to myself speak at this point. It's the fact that we are recorded and on camera that is still uncomfortable, but I'm used to hearing my voice.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, a lot of people seem to not like to hear their own voice, and I sympathize with that. I agree with that. But for me, I love to listen to myself talk. I love the sound of my voice. It's just the things that I say. So the way I word things, and I try to be funnier than I am, and that's the part of it that I hate. But really, I think I sound pretty cool. So that part of it is awesome. And I have had the pleasure of doing some voiceover work for TRL. We do promo videos for things, and I love doing that because I get to read something that's already written. It's scripted. I just have to read it, add a little bit of panache, but I don't have to think of something to say while I'm doing that. And that I love. And I've often thought, I wonder if I could turn this into a lucrative career. And today, we'll find out exactly how realistic that is, if it is, in fact, just that easy. Because in the studio with us, we have a professional audiobook narrator, Corey Snow. And Annalisa, would you like to actually do the formal introduction?
I would love to. That was a perfect segue. I have a little bit of information on our guest that I want to share with you. So our guest today is a professional audiobook narrator and voice talent from right here in the Pacific Northwest. He records from his home studio in Olympia, Washington. He has recorded hundreds of audiobooks. We tried to kind of come up with a number, and it got iffy between 300 and 400, including the Shadow Strike series and Thunder Below by Admiral Flucky. Since 2013, he has also been the host of Listen Here, a lunch break story time for adults, which is at the Olympia Timberland Library and via Zoom, which is, fun fact, our longest running program at TRL. Welcome to the podcast, Corey Snow.
Thank you. It's such a pleasure to be here. I should just offer one correction. I am not the host of Listen Here. I am the talent. Zach is the host.
Okay,
because I don't want to take his thunder on that, because he works so hard on it.
He does.
I just show up and read, and he does all of the other work, and it really is, it wouldn't happen without him. So, yeah.
Well, Zach is fantastic. I will second that, and we look forward to having him on the podcast in a future episode as well.
Absolutely.
So we'll give him his kudos there for you. Also.
Cool beans. But it's a real pleasure to be here. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks for joining us.
Yeah, happy to have
pleasure.
you. Well, I want to start at the very beginning here. We thought this would be kind of an interesting look behind the scenes into what goes into recording audiobooks and what that profession is like. So, I want to start from the very beginning. And at what point in your life, because you have some interesting, things in your bio, what point did you realize, hey, I've got a really excellent voice. I need to figure out how to make money off of this. It's just too good.
Wow. So for me, it wasn't that I said, I have a good voice, I should make money off of it. It was from when I was a small child, I wanted to perform. I initially, when I was like 7, 8 years old, I wanted to be a DJ so bad. So I had like my little record player, and I would sit in my closet and pretend I was being a DJ. And I really wanted to do that. And for a number of years, I kind of like had that in mind as I was going through school, not in any kind of like laser focus, but I always thought that could be fun, So I took acting courses and I did various stage performances, all like local or in school and stuff, nothing major. But when I got out of school and started looking into the actual on the ground way that it works, I found, maybe if I'd been a little older, if I'd been born earlier, it probably would have been a little different. But by the time I came of age in the late 80s, early 90s, the landscape was different. And it's an extremely cutthroat business. And there are only a few DJs, so to speak, people who do live on the air kinds of hosting of radio shows. When you think about it, there's how many stations in this area? A few dozen?
Yeah, there's only so many.
And there aren't that many slots for people like that. So the other thing I wanted to do at that point, I kind of put all that on hiatus for a number of years when I joined the Army, did a bunch of stuff and so forth. When I got out, I kind of considered it again, but doing commercial work, which was kind of where I was thinking of going. And, at that point, I kind of understood that I had like a fairly good voice for certain kinds of things. Like I could do I think I always thought I'd be great at doing those wrestling or the monster truck ads. Sunday at the Tacoma Dome, that kind of thing. Or
that was exciting. That was like a preview.
We all wanted to have, everybody who's wanted to get into voice work has always wanted to be that movie guy.
Yeah, right.
And I'm trying to remember Don LaFontaine, incredibly nice man. I met him a few times. He's passed on since, but the number of slots for people doing that kind of thing is very, very small. And local ad work, doing work on like radios or national ad work, if you aren't living next door to the radio station that's bringing in local talent, you're not going to get any work. And even if you do, you're going to get very small amounts because they don't have a huge amount. And they do 90% of what they do. They use their already existing in-house talent. Regional and national ads, if you don't live in Los Angeles, New York, maybe Chicago, you're probably not going to be getting a lot of it. There are people who make a living at it, but it's a cutthroat business. And so I kind of like got out of that. I was really still wanted to do it. And so I was doing a lot of practice. I had some relatively inexpensive equipment and software, and I was recording books for LibriVox and stuff. And I thought, this is kind of fun because I've read all my whole life. I've been an avid reader. And so I took a book that I was fond of and I recorded a couple of chapters from it. And I just posted them, I think just like on Facebook, as sort of like, hey, give a listen to this and see what you think. And a friend of mine, he listened to it. He's another narrator, but he's also now a producer. And he said, that's not the best work I've ever heard, but I could get you work with that. And I said, well, then you should get me some work with that. And one thing led to another. And at the time I was still writing software. I worked for like places like Microsoft and stuff. After I got out of the Army, I became a coder and did that for, must have been 15, 20 years. But the books started trickling in. I got an offer here, an offer there. And then over time, I just started doing it more and more. And eventually I decided, I'm going to just do this full time. And that's kind of what I've been doing since.
So how do people find you then? Like, how do you get work, I guess? So you're not contracted with a particular company, right? You're
not exclusively, no. Different producers work differently. There's independent producers, but the bulk of my work comes from studios. And those studios have names like Podium Productions and Tantor Audio, and occasionally I get stuff from like Harper or stuff like that, or something like that. They go through other studios. So there's a number of production studios, and either they get hired by a publisher who owns the print and audio rights to a book, or they purchase the rights and say, hey, we want to produce the audio version of this. So they just buy the audio production rights.
Okay.
And then most of these places have a stable of people that they have on call. They're almost all freelancers. The days of working in-house are long gone, along with the dinosaurs. It did happen once. There were people who actually worked full-time in production houses, but that's many, many decades ago.
Producers probably figured out that's not the most lucrative avenue for them.
Yeah, so and technology helped enable it too, because by the time that started happening, we had the ability to carry sound more with more fidelity over long distances using ISDN. And prior to that, if you weren't local, you couldn't do something locally, right? But with things like ISDN and then the internet made it possible to deliver high quality audio without being physically present, and that changed the game a lot. All of a sudden, if you had the right skills and at first quite a bit of money because you needed to buy the equipment to do it, but you could do it at home, and that kind of opened that up. But to answer your original question, I have several studios, and sometimes I get calls out of the blue from studios I'm not familiar with. And so it usually works one of two ways. I'll either get somebody say, hey, got a book for you. When is your schedule open? Other times it'll be like, hey, I've got a potential book for you. Would you mind reading these sides? Several pages of the script. It's usually like a disconnected parts of it that include things like dialogue and narrative and stuff, so they can get a sense of how I would
they want to
handle
see
it.
if you're the right fit for that book.
Yeah, or whether I could handle the accents. Like I got one recently for a book that had a lot of Cajun accents, and when I sent it, I was like, "Look, I think I could do this. But if I did get picked, I would want to get some time to practice my Cajun because it's hard. That's a hard accent."
Well, one of my later questions was about like character voices. How many books have you recorded that involve that kind of?
The vast majority of any fiction book is going to have characters in it, and those characters are going to need to have consistent voices. Different narrators approach it differently. Like some narrators will have, how do I put it? There are some narrators who have a very sort of flat tone, and a lot of people really like that. They're not reading it like a robot, but they don't inject a lot of emotion into it. The thinking being that you're reading the text and you need to present it as text being read. And so then the listener can fill it in, and that works. People do enjoy that. Others, I'm more in the camp of, I actually like to perform it, but I don't go over the top on it. And so like when I do characters, I don't like try and leap all the way into them the way somebody might on a stage, for example. I tend to do what I call I sketch them. So I'll kind of like suggest an accent or a tone or an inflection. Sometimes I'll get heavier on it, but not comically so. I don't go Dick Van Dyke on an accent, but I will do a Scottish or an Irish accent, or I'll put a lilt or a brogue or something in on something. And that helps people because you don't want to dominate the listener's experience. Right. This is my perspective. I'm no professional trainer. I'm not a coach. And there are people who are probably watching this going, that's against all of the rules of acting. It's like, I have no idea what the rules of acting are. I perform and it works for me, and it seems to work for the people that listen to me. But I try and like sketch the characters, and then the listener can fill it in. And it's amazing how much the listener does in the relationship. It's actually like 90% what they're doing. And what I'm doing is I'm just providing something for them to fill it in. And so I don't want to like dominate their experience by going into caricature. And the human brain is weird. I can't speak for anybody else's experience reading books, but when I read a book that's got a description of something like they're driving in a car or something like that, I can hear the wind and I can see the road moving and so forth. And I want people who are listening to be able to get that same experience as if you were reading it. And different narrators approach that differently. We all have the same goal of delivering a good experience to the listener.
That's a fascinating philosophy.
I know. I'm just like sort of processing that as you're saying it.
Well, I think what you're describing is a little bit more intricate than what I originally thought, which is that it could be distracting if you were to go like full all in.
It absolutely could be, yeah.
It could take you away from the actual material.
Absolutely. And like if a book has like young children in it, and I get books that have like 7-year-old girls who are the children of one of the main characters or something like that. There is no planet, there's no universe in which I will ever sound like a 7-year-old girl.
Not authentically, most likely.
So I won't try and sound like a 7-year-old girl, but I will do some of the mannerisms of a small child. I'll raise my voice a little bit, and I'll speak a little breathily, and I'll sort of like enunciate a little less and things like that. And as long as I'm consistent, people can fill in the gaps. And I don't have to lead them. They'll take themselves to the destination. I just have to kind of like go, here, let's step this way a little bit. And then all of a sudden that character then becomes, that voice becomes that character, and they're automatically translating it in their head to that tiny little girl's voice or what have you.
Oh, that's fascinating.
At least that's my perspective.
I appreciate that because I don't listen to or read a lot of fiction personally, mostly reading nonfiction, but I do find excessive inflection or leaning into characters to be pretty distracting because it, in my mind, it'll take on a shape. The character has a certain, sound or attitude, and I like to be able to fill that in like you're describing. I don't want to have that, basically foisted upon me
Sure.
by the narrator. So I kind of lean away from that. I don't know how you feel about those, but
I don't have a huge opinion on it, but
Fair enough.
I'm curious how how many accents have you done? How do you work on your accents and perfect them? And
Oh, well, I have a whole set of accents that I can do that I feel confident in. Like I can do Scottish, Irish, British. I can do French, German, Italian, Spanish.
so just a
I'm
couple.
really good at Eastern European accents. I'm fairly good at like the difference between, say, a Japanese or a Chinese accent or even Thai. The problem is when you get into like very specific regional accents.
Mhm.
Like I can do the difference between a Northern Ireland and somebody who's not from Northern Ireland, or I can do a one of those really thick accents.
Mhm.
But I don't want to do it too long because I'm not native and I'm not good enough at it to sustain that for long periods of dialogue. But so the challenge is discerning like when you're reading something that is hyper local and you need to know the difference between a Glaswegian accent and an accent from other parts of Scotland, or the difference between Geordie and Yorkshire.
Mhm.
That if I'm going to do that, I will not generally take a book that is narrated in that style. And frankly, very few people are dumb enough to try and cast me to be reading in
Right,
that
right.
particular accent. And I know people who are better for it, who are like literally British, who could do that much more effectively than me. So a few times I've been like, hey, go talk to this guy. He's much better. But for characters that aren't like the main character
Mhm.
and they show up, no problem. But if it is a very specific local accent, there's research that comes into it, whether it's to hire a dialect coach or an accent
Yeah, I was
coach.
gonna
That's
ask,
what I
who
was
gives you
gonna
the
ask.
feedback on that?
Yeah, there's a few that do it, and they generally charge fairly reasonable rates. And that's just part of the cost of doing business.
Sure.
So I will schedule an appointment with one of them, and we'll spend some time going over something, and they'll give me some pointers, or we'll practice the specifics of the really for me 90% of it is just the mechanics of it, because the way the mouth and the tongue and the jaw and so forth are positioned are different in the way Americans speak and the way British speak, for example, or the way the French speak or Germans and what have you. But most of the time I don't have to go to that level of verisimilitude,
Hmm.
because if I'm just doing an accent of a person who is just described as generically German, I don't like try and find out what part of Germany he's from. It's not really relevant. I'll just give him a German accent. And if he's supposed to be funny, I might give him one of those really, sort of stereotypical German accents. It also depends on the book. If it's intended to be comedic, then yeah, I'll make it a slightly more comedic accent. If it's not intended to be, or if it's a drama or a thriller, I'll make it more I'll make it more restrained, if that makes sense.
So presumably the accents and cultivating the ability to do various accents is something that you've had to add over the years. You didn't just come into
Yeah, it
you know,
didn't spring from the forehead of Zeus
with
full
a
form.
dozen plus different
No.
accents. In addition to that, what other aspects of recording professionally have you had to sort of improve on since you got that first little feedback? Oh, I could potentially get you some work with this. Well, how did you build off of that?
That's a really interesting question. For like things like accents and stuff, the reason I came fairly well prepared was because I spent so much time watching and consuming non-American media. I was just absolutely riveted to British television in the 80s and the 90s. I would watch that stuff. I loved it, right? And that kind of as more media from other places became available, I would watch a lot of that. Sometimes I wouldn't even understand the language, but it was kind of fun to watch, and so I'd find myself practicing a little bit of it. Nothing major. I wasn't like really trying to like, how do I sound authentically French? It was just kind of fun to listen to these things and then kind of like put that in my head. But as to what things I had to do to improve my craft, what I found was that narration, and it's also important to note that narration and voice acting are very different worlds. We kind of like are talking about them, we're conflating them a little bit, and that's pretty typical. That's actually, for what 90% of people, they think of, like when I say I'm a voice actor, they think I'm doing like commercials or movie voiceovers. Or when I say I'm an audiobook narrator, they still put me in that same bucket. But if you were to ask a full-time professional VO, and a full-time professional narrator, do you guys do the same job? We would be like, no.
Yeah.
And what's interesting also is that the narrators will say, I could not possibly do what those guys do. And the voice actors, the ones who are doing more of the short form stuff, would be like, I have no idea how those people do what they
That's
do.
fascinating.
Because for them, we're the marathon runners. I sit down in a booth and I record for 3, 4, sometimes 6 hours a day. I'm sitting in front of a microphone, trying not to make extraneous noises, just shooing my cat off and trying to maintain the same tone and affect and inflection and everything for all that time.
Do the characters consistently.
And do the characters consistently and stuff. And also there's a lot of prep work that goes into it. For people who do more short form stuff like corporate narrations and stuff, and I do some of that. But there are people
I saw that
who's-
on your website.
I don't do a lot of it, but when I do, it's usually just drop in, read the script, bang it off, and then it's gone. And so it's a different kind of world, and the skills that you bring to it, there's a lot of overlap, but the specific craft that you bring into it, those are going to be different. So the things that I had to learn were things like how to, honestly, as a performer, is when you're narrating, is how to constrain yourself. If I'm on a stage and I've done stage work where a character is like getting angry or something like that, what are you going to do? You're going to shout. You're going to stomp around. You're going to flail your arms. Well, I can't do any of that when I'm sitting in front of a microphone, and I can't even shout with my microphones, and possibly with this one. If I was to shout loudly enough, I would risk physically damaging it. You don't do that with a sensitive microphone, and it would just sound terrible because it would just be all distorted and stuff. So you have to develop a craft where you can sound like you're being really, really loud and really, really intense without necessarily pushing the envelope of the equipment's capabilities. So learning to kind of like constrain my performance, but also learning how to perform in a completely non-visual manner. Like if I'm on camera, and I guess I am right now, but you can use nuance of expression and stuff. I watch movies and I'm just like, I can see the character didn't say anything, but I can actually see the whole thing that they just did or said, or whatever was going through the character's mind, just based on changes of expression. There are people out there who can do that, and I just love watching that. I don't have that tool available to me.
Right.
Everything has to happen with my voice.
And you're saying that about stage presence too, and I don't know a lot about the background around acting coaching and all of that, but I have heard that especially on stage you want to almost exaggerate all of your movements and emotions and expressions because that's what makes it visible from the back of the theater essentially. So really that is really pulling it back.
I've done stage work, and not a lot of it, never professionally, but when you do stage work, you're almost laughing internally at how open and exaggerated and almost clown-like everybody on the stage is. But to the audience, 30, 40, 50, 100 feet away, that's making it look more realistic to them. And that's important, and also when you're on a stage, you have to project and so forth. And one of the shows that I did, one of my one of my fellow cast members said that because I was doing a big soliloquy at one point, said that I could feel your voice in the boards. And I was like, that's good. That was the best compliment I could have gotten. It's like, so, but it's a different kind of thing. So I had to learn all of that and adjust my performance. But there was also a lot of technical craft that came along with it. When I first started this, I didn't know about mic placement, keeping your mouth consistently distant from a specific point on the microphone as much as possible. I didn't even know about the different types of microphones, and so I had to kind of do a lot of research there. I had to figure out what kind of equipment I would actually want to target and what my budgets were. And then I had to also learn how to use the software and how to record in a manner that the production companies, that when I'm sending them the audio, what kind of audio do they want? Because there's different ways of doing it. And I had to learn those techniques. So that's, I had to learn a lot of technique, a lot of craft, a whole lot of craft.
You are probably our most prepared guest that we've ever had for that technical aspect.
That's very kind of you. Thank you.
We didn't have to worry about that with you.
I kind of want to go back to like the technical, that actually what goes into recording an audiobook, because you mentioned recording for, hours at a time.
Right.
And
how many days though, if you're doing 6-hour days?
there's formulas, if you can believe it. There's like
I can't believe it.
There's whole calculations. If you came to me and says, Corey, how long would it take you to produce this book? My first question would be, what's the genre? And then how many words? And if you said nonfiction, 50,000 words, I would just divide that by 9,200 and say, that's the number of hours that the book will be when it's finished. Approximately, that's a general, some will do 9,600. I do 9,200.
Okay.
I speak a little bit more quickly than some, but you just basically divide that. And then in terms of the actual time it takes, it's going to be anywhere from 3 to 4 human hours per finished hour of audio. And it might be more. Usually I try and target a little less, but that's a good, like, when all is said and done, human beings will have spent 3 to 4 hours per finished hour of a book. And that includes like the narrator getting the script and reading it. And has to read through it, take notes on it and so forth. And if it's nonfiction, there's additional time because I have to research things, especially if there's names, and if it's a fantasy or something like that, oh boy, a lot of names to research and, have conversations with the author about how is this spoken or how do you want these accents to sound because they're not from Earth, but in general, you research it, you find all the names, you find all the places that you're going to need to know how to speak and pronounce and all the accents, take all these notes. Then you record it. And that takes time because you're going to be stopping and starting. Every time I make a mistake, I have to roll back a little bit and continue recording. So it usually takes me about an hour and a half of booth time to get 1 hour out, but that's raw audio.
Yeah.
Then I pay somebody to listen to it, and then they follow along in the script, and they note all the places where I screwed up, which is hopefully not that many. Usually more than I want.
Isn't it always?
As you do. And they note all the places where there's problems, but they also note places where there's things that can be fixed without me re-recording it, like mouth noises or bumps between phrases or something like that, or background noises, or just awkward pauses or pauses that are too short. And then I get a set of pickups back. We call them pickups. It's basically, these are the corrections. And it usually comes in the form of a spreadsheet, but it can just be like a PDF file with a list of the things you need to re-record.
Timestamps and whatnot. And yeah.
Ideally, I get a reel of, because what the person who's listening will do is when they're listening and they hear an error, they'll just go, and they'll snip it and they'll send me a sample along with it. And they'll just be numbered so I can just go through, and I just pull it all into my software, and I read the thing, say, okay, I left out a word, and I'll listen to it so I can match the tone.
Got it.
And then I can just record it right there. That way I don't have to go sorting through 30, 40, 50 chapters and find timestamps. That just takes forever.
Yeah. So you're referring to the product that you get, the book or whatever, as the script. Would you describe yourself as actually reading whatever it is fully in advance? It sounds like you're taking notes on it, but I mean, so basically you're reading these things ahead of time.
Yeah. You got to read the whole thing. The classic joke is you don't want to get to the last chapter and find out that the guy you've been voicing with like some sort of Midwestern accent has a voice tag says he said in his thick Scottish brogue. That's, that's happened to people who didn't read ahead. And then all of a sudden, most of the book has to be redone.
Well, that makes total sense to me. I mean, I can't imagine just going into it blind, having never read it, because even small segments, how you actually pronounce the words and go through it, and like having it, I already read through it once, is supremely helpful in the very limited voiceover stuff that I have done as part of my job. Like, I can't just read it once through. So that, I mean, it makes sense, but obviously it adds a level of time that it's going to take you to invest in this.
And I'm reading it pretty quickly. I already read very quickly as well, which is a nice skill to have. It's a good adjunct to what I do. So I can read really fast. And I'm also not consuming it the way I would consume a book that I'm reading for pleasure. I'm inhaling it, Sometimes I'll even use little speed reader apps that help me get through it more quickly. I need to get the sense of the words. I need to find where there's going to be things that I don't understand or words that I don't get. And I need to understand the plot. But I don't necessarily need to remember every detail, every rock that they walked through or walked around and stuff. So, there's a balance there. So I try and get through it as quickly as possible because I don't get paid per studio hour. I get paid per finished hour. So like after I'm done recording the pickups, I send those and the other list of errors that didn't need recording. They go back combined to an editor, and the editor gets the raw files and the pickups and puts all that together, and then removes any of the errors that were listed that I didn't need to re-record. And then we'll also trim them out so that the right amount of lead in, the right amount of lead out, gaps at the right points, 2.5 seconds between sections and so forth. And then a mastering engineer will take the files and process them so that they sound good. And I'm listing all of these roles separately. Frequently, they're the same person. Like an editor, I master my own audio most of the time, but the editor and the proofer can sometimes be the same person, or the proofer and the mastering engineer can be the same person, or sometimes it's all in one. It just depends.
Well, I'm a little embarrassed to say that I didn't think that much about the fact that you will have to speak to the author. Is that
not
every
always?
time?
No, not always. Actually, in fact, sometimes you're constrained from doing it.
Oh.
Like if a studio purchases the production rights from an author, or if the author sold their rights to a print house, and then the print house wants to produce the audio and hire somebody else. Well, now we're like 3 degrees of separation from the author. And for one reason or another, and I am never given the reason why. And the assumption is when I'm getting something from a studio that author contact is not happening.
No.
And if I have questions, I have a producer I work with, and I will send the producer the questions, and that producer may or may not be in contact with the author. They will be in contact with the rights holder, or they might be the rights holder, and the rights holder is the one who makes the final call. And the reasons for not having author contact are myriad. Maybe the book was written 15 years ago and the author's not interested or doesn't remember. Maybe the author's dead. Maybe the author's really hard to work with. Lord knows there's a few of those out there. Or maybe they don't want the author to know that the book is being produced in audio until it's out, because then they might raise a stink about it not being produced with their approval. I can think of all different kinds of reasons.
I see.
But nobody ever tells me. They just, here's the book, and let us know if you have any questions. Sometimes, though, and it's nice when I do have author contact, I can reach out to them. But the producers always want to know what conversations are happening. So no sidebars.
Sure.
You always keep them looped in what's happening. But like when I had a 22-hour-long book about the history of Eurasian steppe empires, I was at least able to have a conversation via email with the author to ask him how to speak these Proto-Indo-European words. That was a fascinating project.
That would be helpful. Yeah. I bet you learned a lot of interesting things from some of those.
Yeah. Do you retain what you read?
I do retain quite a bit of it. I always have been pretty good at retaining what I read. That's another reason why I think I'm pretty good at what I do, is I've always been such an avid reader and an autodidact. I read and read and read. I have a hard time learning from videos, for example. Like if I need to do something on my car, I'll look up, how to replace the alternator or something like that. And it'll be like 5 YouTube videos, and I'm just like, just give me the text.
Yeah.
That's kind of how I've always worked. So yeah, I do retain quite a bit of it. Not enough to like teach people about it, I think, but I retain a lot. So, which is cool because, I get paid to read and learn things, which is cool.
How do you feel? I was looking up some data prior to our recording today, and because what I found out is that audiobooks has surpassed ebooks.
Really?
Yes. And it actually happened in 2023.
You would think I would know this.
So as far as, digital checkouts, audiobooks are now our most popular format. And to date for 2025, our patrons have checked out more than 1 million of them.
Really? Out of the Timberland Regional Library system?
Yes.
That is wild. And
Yes.
it's really cool.
Yeah, we just passed 1 million. And so with that.
Just this year. Dang.
You're not even over yet. Yep.
We're not even.
Yeah, you got another 2 months. Those are rookie numbers.
I'm excited. We always beat our last year's record, of course,
That's
with
awesome.
digital formats. But so with that rising popularity, have you seen that change reflected in your work? Like how has the job or the industry changed? Or have you seen that? Is there a bigger demand or?
I'm not real familiar with the specific numbers. And what I've seen is a consistent and increasing demand for books, but not like a massive spike. And what I've also seen is I've seen a lot of other narrators in the business and people who are like being booked for weeks and months out. Like I'm not fully booked, but I'm booked. I have books logged well into next year.
Mhm.
I have a lot of gaps in my schedule. So, hey, if anybody wants a book being done,
Anyone listening to this,
hit me up.
know-
But yeah, so I mean, yes, I have seen it, but not in any kind of like massive sense. But the stuff that you're talking about does not surprise me at all, because audiobooks are so popular because they provide a way for people who didn't have the interest or opportunity to consume
Mhm.
print. They can do it now. They can listen while they're commuting, or they can listen while they're on the treadmill, or they can listen while they're doing something else. Weed whacking or what have
right,
you.
exactly.
It's the kind of thing that
Multitasking.
you can devote part of your attention to actually hearing the book.
Mhm.
Whereas reading is a much more sort of like all consuming experience, which is also why I love it. I can sit down and I can read my book, and there's a tactile element
Mhm.
to it, and it feels great to hold a book. And I love the smell of books, and I love the feel and the weight.
There are a lot of people listening to this in the library world who would absolutely agree
Sure.
with that.
I love the smell of
But-
books, especially old books.
You are teeing me up perfectly for the devil's advocate question that I wanted to ask,
Feel
which
free.
is a hot button issue, I think.
Does it start with A and end with I?
Oh, it might.
Oh no, that's a second
it's another one.
That's a second one.
We're getting there.
Sorry.
Because you're describing,
Go ahead.
consuming audiobooks, and something that comes up a lot, just in the library world or in the book world, is, do audiobooks count as reading?
Absolutely. I mean, there's no question in my mind. And I think nobody who is like a serious person would feel that's not true. Because otherwise, like, what do you tell somebody who's blind? That's
Exactly,
not fair.
yeah.
What do you
Yeah,
tell
right.
somebody who's blind? Is somebody who has dyslexia and has such a hard time consuming books? Are they not reading when they listen to a story? There's all kinds of reasons why people would want to listen as opposed to read. Ironically, I'm not one of them. I'm actually not that fond of audiobooks.
I was going to ask if
That
you
was a
listen to
question.
them.
I
we
do
had.
listen to them because it's important to hear what other people are doing
Yeah.
and to help hone my craft. But I consider it more to be like sort of a mechanical part of my job,
Mhm.
as opposed to something I do because I really love it. And there are narrators out there who are going to hate that I said it, but part of the reason why I love doing what I do is because I love to read. It is the thing that helps keep me going. I love reading. And so reading lets me kind of encompass that entire experience in my head. So yeah, I really like reading. But I mean, there are people out there who either don't like it, fair play, no problem, or don't have the wherewithal to do it. They don't have the time. They don't have the ability, like maybe they have a learning disability or a visual disability, or they have a mental disability. Like I have ADHD. It's hard for me to sit down and read, sometimes. I have to really kind of be in the right place for it. But there's some people, they just can't. They can't sit still long enough to do it. Or there's so many different reasons why.
I mean, I am liable to fall asleep if I am trying to read a physical book because I tend to do that at the end of the day.
Absolutely.
But an audiobook, you can multitask. You can do other stuff.
Absolutely. And so, yeah, there's absolutely no question in it. And nobody who thinks otherwise, in my opinion, is a serious person. It's like, that's just not a question.
Well, I wanted to ask you because I knew that you'd have opinions, so I appreciate you sharing them. If I'm going to ask anyone, it's going to be someone who knows what they're talking about,
Well, thank you.
But now that you mentioned the other,
Yeah, we already kind of previewed
Now
it.
that you
so-
put
I
it
didn't
out there
mean
in the air.
Yeah, I didn't mean it. I just assumed that was where it was going.
Oh, no,
I knew
it's
it'd
going
come
there.
in.
It's going there.
There's that elephant.
I'll let Chris lead you there.
Well, so I am interested in what your take is on AI audiobook narration, which is becoming
Mhm.
a bigger part of the industry from
Yeah.
what I can tell. And so from someone who's an insider, what is your take on the increasing prevalence of the availability of and the usage of AI narration for audiobooks?
Well, the first thing to understand about this stuff, this is, I'm going to phrase this this is my opinion, but it's backed up by actual data you can look at and read. But the generative AI, what we generally consider the stuff built off of large language models, because it's also important to understand, and I don't want to get into the details, into the weeds. I did tech work. I wrote software for 20 plus years. I actually have a lot of insight into some of this. There's different kinds of AI.
Yeah, definitely.
But the generative AI and the stuff that is being used to make those weird little videos that are looking more and more realistic, or to generate AI slop, or to narrate audiobooks, it is all theft. It's all stealing content from people who did it. Like, I know my books have been hoovered up by these AIs against my will. I have clauses in my contracts that says you can't do that with the stuff I produce for you. Like, if somebody comes to me with an independent book, I have a clause in my contract that says you may not use these recordings ever. You have all the rights to it, except that one. I'm holding that one back. You can't feed it to AI. You can do whatever else you want with it. You can give it away for free. You can do whatever, but you cannot feed it to AI. How useful is that? How effective is it?
Yeah, probably not.
Not terrifically so in the real world, but you got to do something. But the problem is that companies like there are some big audiobook producers out there like Audible and stuff that are really pushing the use of AI narration to authors that don't have a large amount of money to invest in the production of an audiobook. And they're presenting it as a good option that is inexpensive enough for them to still get the same quality of product. And it's not. It just is not. Even if you leave aside all of the ethical questions, AI narrated audio, it is getting better and better, and it sounds better and better, but it only sounds better and better in that sort of like, it's getting to a point where we're getting away from the uncanny valley, but it's still not a good performance.
Right. I was watching some comparison videos, and particularly with people who, with authors who are talking about the version through Amazon Audible, and you're picking your voices and tweaking them. And what strikes me in the kind of difference between a human narrated audiobook, the samples that I was listening to, and the AI versions is that, AI it's not reading the text and understanding it,
right?
It's just interpreting it. So anytime you're using a generative AI model, it's just mathematically spitting words back out at you that fit together based on the knowledge that's, that's in that generative engine. It doesn't actually know what it's saying. It doesn't read the text.
Yeah, there's no intellect there.
And that part of it seems, the most striking to me, because you can really tell when someone is reading back something that they understand the meaning of, and then can add that in the right inflection and can pronounce it in a way that that a human would.
Sure.
And something that's like kind of trying to mimic that.
Yeah. Or make performance decisions to change the interpretation of it.
Right.
Like one of the, I should have brought a sample of a script, because there's like, one of the things I like to do when something is like serious, but then transitioning into something funny. How do I explain it? Like, a character is like, do you mean to tell me that this sort of thing, and what the hell is going on with that over there? That instant transition from them saying something relatively calmly to, without even, and actually lighting the words together and then changing the entire interpretation of the following stuff. It can be really useful performance thing, but I don't think you're ever going to hear an AI that generated it. They'll never do that. It will never make those kinds of performance choices. It will also generally not be able to make the kinds of performance choices that would seem counterintuitive or would add something, but without, like you said, that knowledge of what's going on.
Right.
Whether that's a long pause in a sentence, or whether it's somebody like getting choked up, on a particular phrase or something. You're not going to see or hear an AI do that. Not yet, and who knows? I mean, the technology is getting better, but it's also, I think in another sense, it's a bit of a dead end technology, because no matter how good these large language models get, they're not getting more intelligent. They're all just kind of like moving towards some median that is, somebody's going to say, well, that's good enough, but it's never going to really achieve the kinds of heights that human performance can. Now, at some point, we probably are going to have real AI. I think we're on the cusp of that, and I have no idea what it'll look like, but AI that can actually pass a Turing test and really is thinking The question is, will that be able to perform, or will it really have the same kinds of insight into the human experience as a human does? Who knows? We're in a brave new world there. But so to circle back to the original question, because I'm getting a little esoteric, I feel like, but
We like that.
yeah, fair enough. But the AI narration is a threat, but it's also not right now. I feel like they're like building a basement, and I really don't want to put it in pejorative terms, because there are authors out there who have great books that just they can't get them produced in audio, or they feel like they can't get them produced in audio because they don't have the right information,
Right.
or they don't have the resources to do it. And there are ways to do it less expensively. There are what's called a royalty share, which is, instead of paying somebody up front, you enter into an agreement with them where they get some of the royalties, or they get 50% of the royalties or whatever for a certain period of time. Audible has the Audiobook Creation Exchange, which is also the part that's pushing a lot of this AI narration. But you can enter into royalty share agreements with union narrators, via that thing. There are ways to make that happen. But people who want real performances for their work will always go to humans. What we're seeing, I've seen a number of people who are like, I had no idea that this was actually kind of like harmful.
Well, one of the things that came up when I was looking into this a little bit as a way to use it is to create a translated audiobook, like into a different language. And, if I'm being charitable with all the like kind of ethical considerations aside, I can see a use for that element of it, where you're potentially making a book available via audiobook in another language using this technology that maybe otherwise wouldn't have been produced, or would have been prohibitively expensive to produce in the language that it wasn't written in. So I don't know if you have a read on whether or not that's a valuable use of the technology. Or
I mean, I can see where you're coming from, but I also know so many narrators who work in so many different languages, native speakers of all different languages, Vietnamese, Chinese, Thai, Japanese. You can find somebody to read your book in another language. And the other thing, that kind of like it segues into another element of the audiobook industry that I think has been problematic and is becoming less so, which is representation. There are so many authors out there who are people of color, Black people, gay people, trans people, people of other ethnicities from other countries who speak different languages or speak English as a second language. And they are not really finding all the time the right person to represent their work. Or you have books that are focused around these characters or centered around these characters, and you shouldn't be casting me to do that. And thankfully, I don't generally get a lot of those. I used to get a few. And back when I was earlier in my career, I didn't really think about it. I would just take them. Now I'm like, no, I know a couple of narrators who are LGBTQ who would be much better suited to give this an authentic sound. So go talk to this person over here or that person over there. So representation is really important. I am lucky because I'm an old cis white guy, and I have that deep sort of rumbly professorial tone that I think is sort of like starting on second base for some of this work. But there's people out there who have incredibly good performances and really, really great acting chops who are just not getting the same shrift. They're not getting the credit they deserve. I listen to their work and I'm like, this is amazing. This is so good. And then when it goes out and it's on the reviews, the reviewers are looking at it, they're giving me all the praise, and then they're sandbagging these women because their voice doesn't sound right, or it's high pitched, or she was annoying, or she was strident, or all of those other sexist tropes that women deal with just talking to people in an office or something like that. And I just want to reach out and throttle these people. It's like these people, I listen to their performances. I'm like, I wish I was half as good as her. I'm lucky to work with this person. And so that is something that I think is incredibly important, is representation. So I'm really grateful I work with a few different production companies that actually put that up front. Like there's one company I love working with. I don't get as much as I'd like from them because, they've got a lot going on and they've got some great narrators, but they always hire union, and they will always hire a person who represents the best the book that they're doing. If it's about people of color, they're going to hire somebody. If it's from a Black perspective, they're going to hire a Black person. If it's from a gay or trans perspective, they're going to seek those kinds of people out. And it turns out that there's really talented people in those spaces. You don't need to like go and find
surprise.
Yeah, big shock there, right? There's people who want to do it who have been excluded from the space for so long.
Mm-hmm.
You know, thinking about it, something I thought about, but until now. But you mentioned earlier that the business is burgeoning, and I think maybe because the business is burgeoning, that there's now some opportunities for people that might not have been, because now they're like, well, we need somebody, and it's like, oh, it turns out that there's all these people out there who could have done this all along. You know.
So how, if you are an author, I mean, maybe you have some insight into this. If you're an author and you've self-published, how do you find the right narrator for your book?
Well, most authors are going to probably end up going to someplace like ACX or like Authors Republic or a few others. There are sites that cater to the independent author to help them get their books produced in audio form. And so after some research, they're going to probably end up looking into one or more of those options. As far as explicitly finding a person, there's casting sites that you can be like, okay, I've got a book, I want to do this, and they might have different constraints. Like if you want to work through ACX, your book has to be on Amazon, and it has to be on whatever I think it might need to be on Kindle, I'm not sure, but you've got to be able to claim it as a title that's published on Amazon. Then you can make it available for auditions on ACX, and then somebody like me might look at it and go, oh, that sounds interesting, and put in an audition. And then you can pick. And then it provides a whole workflow. So ACX does that. There's other sites that do the same thing, and they provide more or less services. Some are very hands-on, some cost more, some cost less. And so there's all these different options that are available for people.
Is there anything that we haven't asked you today that you think that people should know about you, about
no,
the work you do?
No, I'm just really grateful to be here. I can't think of anything right offhand.
Well, I want you to tell us a little bit about the longest running TRL program that you don't host, but that you take part in. Tell us about that.
Well, Listen Here started off, Chris, you told me it started in 2013.
Is what I understand.
So that's like 12, 13 years ago now, which is amazing to me. And it started off, I don't even really remember. There's a lady named Sarah Pate. And I'm eternally grateful to her because we talked. I wanted to volunteer, right? And I filled out the little volunteer form.
Oh, so you came to us. That's what I was wondering.
No, I filled out the volunteer form because we were going to the library a lot. And as Zach will always tell people at the beginning of the program, I've been going to the Timberland Library downtown since it was in the Carnegie Building. I have memories of reading books in the old Carnegie Building. So I've been a patron of that library since like 1974.
Since the beginning, we'll say.
Yeah, since back in the day. And I was like, I should volunteer to do something. I was thinking, I'd be sorting books or reshelving, things like that. I was willing to do whatever. But I did mention to somebody that I thought it would be kind of fun to be able to read stories. And I was thinking in my head maybe to like teenagers or children or something. But Sarah was like, wait a second. Because prior to that, not too long prior to that, King County Libraries up in Seattle area had done a program that they also called Listen Here. And
we do this in the library world. We just steal each other's ideas.
Absolutely.
If it's
share.
good,
we share.
Okay.
Sure, that's what
it's borrowing. It's taking inspiration from
we
whatever
share with
you want to call
others,
it.
and others share with us, and that's how it is in the library
Fair
world.
enough.
Tell people what the program is.
Oh, I'm sorry.
If they aren't familiar.
Listen Here is a monthly story time for adults. I've always considered the fact that, we don't like, when we're grown-ups, we don't listen to stories the way we did when we were kids, right? You don't like go and sit down and listen to a bedtime story. And one of the things that kind of got me a lot of experience as a narrator before I became a professional narrator was I used to read to my family every night. We would read part of a story, probably for 30 minutes to a couple hours, depending on what we were reading. And not just like little picture books. I mean, we read The Lord of the Rings. We read all of the Harry Potter books. We read Dune and several of the Dune books and Foundation and most of the Vladimir Tautosh series. by Stephen Bruce, one of my favorites. We read the Chronicles of Amber. We went through some heavy and some less heavy stuff, but none of it was like really, really like childish, even though my kids were like, 7, 8 years old when we started. They're in their 20s now, right? But we were doing this until like one of my kids was 22 years old or something like that. But it made me realize, I thought about it. It's like there aren't too many people who can say that they go and listen to a story, just sit down and listen. And we wanted to do this as something that was catered to adults. So it was hard to say a story time because in everybody's mind, it's like, oh, story time, a bunch of kids sitting around with their biscuits, listening to, Pete the Cat or something. But we wanted to have grown-ups have an opportunity to listen to a story that might actually feature grown-up content. And my thought initially was, let's do this at the library on like a Friday. And since it's so centrally positioned, let's do it around lunchtime. And I can't remember if it was my idea or Sarah's idea, but we wanted to like make it possible. Initially, the idea was for like the local workers, specifically the state employees just up the street, because there's like the whole Capitol campus is like 3 blocks up. And we thought, well, let's let people come in and eat their lunch while they listen to a story. And so we positioned it to start at 12:10 and end at 12:50 to give people a little time to get in and out. And it's always held that schedule, but we don't get a lot of state employees coming in. Well, that part never really worked, but the actual program has been very popular. It's waxed and waned, but it's always gone. And it's the first Friday of every month at the downtown library. And it runs from noon to 1. The actual reading is from 12:10 to 12:50. And the selections, Zach always makes the selections, and they are eclectic and they're interesting, and he always picks good stuff. Like in the summer and the spring, he's always picking baseball stuff because he's a huge baseball guy. So he picks some really good stuff though, or some really, really interesting Gothic stuff and picture stuff from local authors and so forth. And it's always a privilege to be able to do it because he gives me some challenging stuff, some stuff that's really interesting and sometimes really, really dark, which is the other thing that we always try and warn people. Hey, sometimes we're going to be going to some dark places here, really adult dark places.
Well, you've been doing this every month for 12 years. You're going to have some unique selections in there. And Zach is a librarian's librarian. He knows his stuff and will absolutely put that kind of thought into it. So,
but it's also offered on Zoom. And is that a product of the pandemic?
It is. Yeah. When the pandemic hit, we kind of like stopped doing it entirely, which was really sad because nobody could go into the libraries and nobody was really positioned to do all of this stuff remotely yet. That all kind of like, it took a little while to ramp that up. Right. But as the pandemic wore on, Zach was like, hey, we want to do this. As soon as we have some time, we're trying to figure out all the logistics of doing it via Zoom. I'm like, let's do it. So I had a little GoPro and we just set it up in my studio and I would read remotely. And then once things relaxed and people could actually start being in people's physical presence again, we went back to doing it in the meeting room, but we just kept doing the Zoom thing and it's really paid off. I think we get more people on the Zoom than we do in person, but we do get a lot of people in person these days, anywhere from like, I don't know, 6 to 20 people most months, which is, I think
that's pretty good for a midday Friday program. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely. And they're not all like retirees or anything like that, which is what you would think. It's like people have all the time in the world. No, we get a lot of younger people and stuff and it's great. I love seeing people. And then you see a lot of the same faces every month too, which I really enjoy.
Well, I will mention, in case anyone's listening to this and wants to join either in person or virtually, TRL.org/events. And then all you have to search is listen here. Yeah. And you will find it. And along with the Zoom link, so you can listen.
Yeah, absolutely. It's always fun. This next one is going to be a couple of Arthur C. Clarke stories because Zach likes to throw me a bone from time to time and he knows I love Arthur C. Clarke.
Well, we really appreciate you being here with us today.
Yeah, this was great. And after listening to me talk to you for the last hour or so, do you think I have a future in this industry myself?
I think anybody who wants to perform and can do it. The one of the biggest misunderstandings about voice work is that the voice is important, and it's actually the least important part. People will think if you've got that specific tone that you're just going to be like, you've got the golden voice, you're just going to be booked all the time. And that is absolutely not true. In fact, it can get in the way because the way my voice sounds, I don't get cast in some of the stuff that I know that I could do well. But I know people that if you were to talk to them in a hallway or in an elevator, you would never think that they were seriously accomplished voice talent. And
Well, I
yet-
believe that you are. 'Cause
Thank you.
I hear your voice in the mic. This guy.
But it's
He narrates.
interesting how many people I meet that you would not think that, because I'm one, I have that deep sort of like rumble, that particular timbre that I think
Right.
a lot of people hear in their heads. And I also have that sort of like mid-Atlantic inflection that I think people hear, like the newscaster kind of
Yes,
sound.
exactly.
But there are people who have incredible careers, far eclipsing mine, that you would listen to them and go, no way, not happening. And they're very, very talented people. So having said that, yes, absolutely.
Thank you. That's the answer I was looking for.
If you want to do it and you have the performance chops, I think you could absolutely do it.
Well, fortunately for Timberland Regional Library, I am not a side hustle guy. I have one single hustle and barely hustle at that. So we'll keep it here. And
I have
But I'll
one
keep
more
your business
plug.
card just
you
in
have one
case.
more plug?
I have one more plug, which is to remind people that if you want to borrow digital titles, audiobooks or ebooks, do so through Libby, because we did mention Audible several times. So
Yes,
Libby.
that's true. Libby is the
Yeah, don't pay for it if you don't have to.
yeah, and
Yeah.
you don't have to pay for it. You can get almost all of the good ones on Libby. That's
Yeah.
true.
And I want to ask if you have anything that you want to plug or tell people where they can find you or.
Well, you can find some of my stuff on Libby, of course. Not all of it, sadly, but that's just the way things are. Almost all of my titles are on Audible. If you really want to dig into my catalog, it goes back a number of years, but definitely check out Libby. See what's there first before you go spending money.
Thanks for that.
But so grateful that you guys were able to bring me on here. This is such a good experience.
This
Thank
was a
you.
treat for us. So
Yeah,
thank you
happy
so
to have you.
much.
I enjoyed this thoroughly.
Thank you for joining us on today's episode. Don't forget to follow or subscribe on your preferred podcast platform. Your feedback helps us improve and reach more listeners.
You can find us on Facebook, Instagram, and TikTok at Timberland Library. If you have any questions or comments, you can email us at trlpodcast@trl.org.
Original music is by our very own librarian and talented musician, Stefan, at the Elm Branch.
Until next time, stay curious, stay inspired, and keep the conversation going. Thank you for being a part of the TRL community.